Ladies and gentlemen, we do thank you very much for your attention, and now we invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Welcome to our top travel destinations. I am your host, Kevin Flanagan. I have been editor of the weekly travel news column in the Sunday Independent and the Fine Wine and Food Guide, and I am here to use my decades of experience to help you know exactly where to stay, eat, drink, shop and explore when visiting the world's top travel destinations. So sit back and enjoy the wonders of travel as we take off on our magical journey together. Welcome to the top travel destinations. My name is Kevin Flanagan, and this week we are going to one of the most extraordinary destinations that I have ever had the privilege of visiting. And this is Cambodia and its capital, Phnom Penh. Now, I arrived from Bangkok to Phnom Penh with my friend Diamond, my good guide to all things Asia. Diamond made a couple of errors on this particular trip. The first being taking a tuk-tuk from outside the airport all the way into the center of Phnom Penh. Now, Phnom Penh has a wonderful history dating back to the 14th century. It's founded on these three huge rivers, the Mekong, the Basik, and the Tonle Sap. And it was colonized by the French in the 19th century. And you can see the remains and the imprint of this wonderful French culture, both in its architecture, in some of the colonial buildings, in the wide boulevards. It really is an extraordinary place, very much like Saigon, with that French flair. But you don't want to be seeing this from the inside of a tuk-tuk. For one thing, it's quite a long journey. It's 40 minutes. And if you're in a tuk-tuk, it means you're actually breathing in fumes and noise for that entire 40 minutes. Get a bus or get an ordinary covered taxi. Tuk-tuks are something to be used once, so you can say you've had the experience, but it's not a long-form means of travel by any means. Diamond also put us wrong at the end of this journey when we moved up to a place I'm going to strongly recommend you visit. But apart from that, his stirring work was absolutely amazing because we got to see this modern Phnom Penh. It's a city I love. It's bustling. And it's recovering from the after effects of the Vietnam War, which spawned the Khmer Rouge and Pol Pot. But they've had 4 decades to recover from that. And we were able to enjoy this incredible fab range of places to stay, eat, shop, and explore. So firstly, where do you stay in Phnom Penh? Well, we found a small little French-style hotel. You can get remarkably cheap places in Phnom Penh for $40, $30, $20 a night for 2 people. Our particular place was all dark wood, polished services, and it had the most incredible trendy restaurant with fab coffee, wonderful egg dishes, and desserts. Very westernized. Now, if that's not your bag, you could try somewhere like the Raffles Hotel, the Royale. This is height of luxury. In a sort of a colonial-era style hotel. Spacious rooms, impeccable service. And it's a real wonderful oasis in the heart of the city. Another place worth considering if you're visiting Phnom Penh is the Rosewood. This is perched atop the Vatnak Capital Tower, so you really get these extraordinary views of the city. But if you just go onto your TripAdvisor, you will find places that will suit every taste and every budget, as will the places to eat. First off, let me tell you a little bit about Cambodian cuisine, or known as Khmer cuisine. It's sort of this wonderful balance of sweet, sour, salty, and bitter flavors. And I found that each dish has this extraordinary harmony, and I think this comes from their use of lemongrass, galang, kaffir lime leaves, Asian basil. These all infuse dishes with this wonderful, vibrant aromas and flavors. rice is a staple. It really is that neutral base that complements the bold flavors that you will find in Cambodian dishes. And sticky rice in particular is very popular. But I did love this subtle use of their spices, their garlic, their ginger, their turmeric, their chili. And then they have this sourness as well. They do this through using ingredients like tamarind and lime juice and vinegar. And we did taste some incredible seafood and freshwater fish dishes because there's a lot of abundant waterways around there. And you can get fish like amok, and you can get these wonderful coconut milk-based fish curry steamed dishes. The fish is steamed and wrapped in banana leaves. And there's a prahok, the fermented fish paste, is very common. So you've got this wonderful collection of flavors. And don't forget the desserts, Cambodian desserts with coconut milk, palm sugar, tropical fruits such as jackfruit and mangoes. It really has everything. A couple of restaurants that stood out for me, which I think is definitely worth trying. Mok Muni, this is modern Cambodian cuisine. And then there's the Friends, the restaurant. And this is dining with a cause. They support vulnerable youth through training programs. And it is really a worthwhile place to visit and dine in and support. But like everywhere in Asia, just go down to the main market. And we walked around at night. Cambodia has this wonderful spirit, I find, and Phnom Penh is the essence of this. It's actually rocking late at night. People eat out very late, and we dined on dishes from street food vendors, $2 or $3, and you get these lemongrasses, these coconut dishes. Absolutely take the eyes out of your head. And there are lots of places to drink. I found a couple of places I would recommend, the Bouchon Wine Bar, the Soros Sky Bar, where you get panoramic views of the city. But if you go down to the central market, the Sa Tomai, you've got this extraordinary collection of stalls, a huge market area. And there's everything there, clothing, jewelry, and food. Also check out Street 240. This is boutiques, art galleries. You'll get some really interesting gifts if you want to bring back something that's truly Cambodian. So there it is, a fantastic place to actually stay, an extraordinary place to look around. I revisited the Royal Palace and the Silver Pagoda. This has the essence of Cambodia's royal heritage. It's a stunning complex and fabulous gardens. You can walk around there because it is hot, it's humid in Cambodia, you're 34 degrees, high humidity. But to just see these glittering pagodas and these opulent palaces and all of these Kyhmer artifacts inside, a lovely little coffee shop to sit down and have some coconut juice or an espresso, it really is fabulous. Then you have to, when you go to Cambodia, you have to decide whether you're going to go and visit the dark side. One of the darkest periods that I've ever come across. Now, I've visited Auschwitz. I've seen some of the horrors, like the ossuary at Verdun, where the bones of French, German, American soldiers were gathered. 200,000 fell in one day. I've seen some dark places, but nothing is darker than what I found in Cambodia and in Phnom Penh in particular. And I think you have to make a call as to whether you're going to go and view these. I would highly and strongly recommend you visit, and I'll tell you why after I've given you a very brief description of the dark side of Cambodian history. And it all revolves around the American involvement in Vietnam, and they bombed illegally under Nixon. They bombed Cambodia because the Viet Cong were coming down from North Vietnam. They went into Cambodia and Laos to avoid the bombers. Nixon determined, and other American leaders determined, that the Viet Cong were fair game. So they indiscriminately bombed. And in Cambodia, they bombed the peasants along the border, and they literally threw them into the arms of the Khmer Rouge, who was led by this fanatic communist called Pol Pot, who made Stalin look like a kindergarten teacher. It's truly shocking. The Americans were kicked out of Vietnam in 1975 and Pol Pot took over. There was a vacuum and the population had been subdued by this war that was erupting on their border. And they had nowhere else to go. The Khmer Rouge under Pol Pot took over. They immediately invaded the capital of Phnom Penh. And this is less than 50 years ago. It's truly chilling when you go and visit Phnom Penh to actually sit and realize this modern day history. And it's worth looking at. They emptied the city. One journalist described seeing hospitals, a Western journalist, the sick were tipped out like garbage from their beds onto the street where they died. And the true horror began then. The Khmer Rouge, basically, over the 4 years from 75 to 79, they pushed the entire population into the countryside and they forced them all to work on the land. Pol Pot decided to turn the clock back to 0, and these horrors ensued. The first of the 2 main genocide museums that you can see that bear witness to this homage is actually in Phnom Penh itself. It's called S21, the Tul Sang prison. This was horribly a school. It looked very much like the school that I pick up my grandson and daughter from in Dublin. But S21 became a torture center and an execution yard. And you can go to S21, but I'd warn you beforehand that you're going to face the very darkest elements of human behavior here. Just to give you a sense of the place, when you enter it, you pay your $10, you get these wonderful audio sets that you drape around your shoulders and you put the earphones on, and it's guided tours from the people. There's 3 or 4 survivors of the tens of thousands who died in S21. You are taken around and you're given this tour. And you'll see extraordinary, chilling instances of how humans can treat other humans in the most unimaginable ways. Just to give you an example, when the Khmer Rouge were kicked out of Phnom Penh by the North Vietnamese army, or the Viet Cong army, they left 14 prisoners strapped to these beds. Now, the beds they were just steel frames, and the prisoners were naked and they were shackled, very Christ-like on these, and tortured with electricity. And once they'd confessed their crimes, they were then taken to the killing fields, which I'm going to describe briefly to you as well. Another witness that you need to really go and see if you're going to understand this dark history. I went and looked at these banks of beds where these rooms are left pretty much as they were found, and the interrogation rooms are probably the darkest places I've ever visited. So this is, on the scale, there is nothing worse, I don't think. What it does show you is the madness of how human beings can treat one another. There's these 6 rules in the playground where people were left hung up to die. And one of the rules was, and it's completely Orwellian, rule number 2 says, if you scream while you're being tortured, you'll be tortured more. It's sort of slightly mind-boggling. And it really is a place where the emotional impact can really affect you. And it did affect me. I didn't even know it had affected me until I'd left. So I would go there, but be warned beforehand that this is going to really confront you with the darkest sides of human nature. Now, once you've finished at S21, the next place, the next genocidal center to visit is the killing fields themselves at Chuan Ek. This is like 15 kilometers outside of Khmer Rouge. You can take a bus or you can take a taxi. We took a taxi and we visited it. And again, the soberness of the experience, it affects you right to the core. The killing fields of Chuan Ek, it was an old graveyard. And what the Khmer Rouge essentially did was, if anybody, now check to see if you'd have been a victim of the Khmer Rouge, if you wore glasses, you were deemed worthy of death. If your hands were soft and not the hands of a peasant, you were deemed worthy of death. If your accent was in any way educated, you can see where this is all going. And because the Khmer Rouge didn't have any money and they had very few guns and rifles, they didn't kill the over 2 million people, their own fellow citizens, with bullets. They used farm implements like hoes, hammers, and when you go to the Killing Field Genocide Museum, you'll walk around 14 stations where the people arrived. They arrived in the dead of night, Some of them were taken from S21, so they'd have been tortured into confessing false crimes. They were just ordinary doctors, nurses, ordinary folk librarians. They were dragged here, they were bound, and they were forced to their knees, and then they were killed with a hoe or a bamboo or a hammer. And they were tossed into these shallow graves. I know this is really grim. Even discussing this, it's very difficult to even get my head around it this little while later. But this is the actual reality of what we can do to one another. And going around the killing fields is particularly sober because the graves were very shallow. And you're warned to tell one of the stewards that if you see fragments of bone or you see, and again, I apologize for the graphicness of this, but this is the actual reality. You'll see little bits of garments peering from the slightly grass-covered knolls where the remains of tens of thousands were. At night, they were executed. They used to play these loud loudspeakers with loud martial music. And a walk round the killing fields is something that I will never, ever forget. You end your visit at the stupa, memorial stupa. And this is where Buddhists used to put the remains. And in this, you've probably seen pictures of all the skulls that were taken once 1979 came along and sanity returned to Cambodia. And the skulls were cleaned and they were all given little annotations to show how they were actually murdered. You go around this for as long as you can take it, and then you leave and you go to a reflection area. And you do need a reflection area after having visited both S21 and the killing fields. And I suppose it's really important just to understand, one, the horror of an invasion. The Vietnam War, the American presence, the French presence before that led to absolute mayhem, and it led to this horror. Now for the good news. After the fall of the Khmer Rouge, Phnom Penh began a very long and difficult process of recovery, which is still underway. And I think going to Cambodia, you can actually support this recovery. And the shadow of the 45, 50 years since the Khmer Rouge atrocities passed still lingers there. I can remember talking to one restaurant owner, and he'd not forgotten the Khmer Rouge, but his main memory was of the famine that blighted the land once the Khmer Rouge had taken over. But you can see, when you walk around Cambodia now and Phnom Penh, you can see this fabulous flourishing of life. And that's what I really want to end this destination tour of Phnom Penh with. It is really resurging. The citizens of Cambodia now are really transitioning. They have a constitutional monarchy, they have democratic reforms. There's still a huge disparity between the poor and the rich, as in most Asian countries. But I loved the spirit of the people and just sitting and talking to them. One of the second nights we were there, we were walking along and I saw in one of the downtown areas a rainbow flag. And we said, can it be that there's a gay bar here? Which would have been unthinkable during the Khmer Rouge. And so we went and we sat and it was pretty much empty and started talking to the owner, a gay man who was so pleased to have visitors from Europe. And we sat, we bought a beer and we chatted to him. And as I chatted there, I asked him about the past, and he said, yes, we're doing everything we can. And there's now a tolerance. You can be gay, you can be transgender in Phnom Penh, which is such an incredible sign of life. And I remember sitting there and thanking him for sharing with us and chatting to some other Cambodian people, both young and old, and really getting this sense of recovery. So I would so strongly recommend that you visit Phnom Penh. You can get international flights there. It is quite easy to access. Many airlines go there. But I think what you'll be doing is if you decide to visit the horror sites, you will be bearing a witness to history, but you'll also be bearing a witness to how humans recover and how a society recovers. I went from Phnom Penh up to a place called Angkor Wat in Siem Reap. And I'm going to do a separate Kevin's Travels story on that because it was the most peaceful place on earth and a really strong antidote to the turmoil of seeing how badly we can treat one another. And that's going to be in a separate podcast. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, I really would ask you to share it with someone that you know, because I think it's really important for me personally to share how travel can inform us and it can give us a sense of the true meaning of being human. So do share this and do please listen to the episode on Angkor Wat, where I went and found peace after finding my soul in turmoil. Thank you for listening to this very special episode on Phnom Penh in Cambodia.